Social Influence, Week 5. This is Julie Hance. There are 3 types of social influence that happen automatically: conformity, compliance, and obedience. First, we'll look at conformity. Conformity is the act of matching attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors to group norms. You may call yourself an individual, but conformity is the reason you don't attend a formal wedding dressed in blue jeans, and it's the reason you wait your turn in line. Why do people conform? Everyone wants to be liked. Everyone needs to be right. This is informational influence. People assume that 4 eyes are better than 2, and if others agree, they must be right. People conform out of a fear of ostracism. Normative influence is the influence that is produced when a person fears the rejection that follows acting out. In order to conform, you must know the in-group norms. My example for this is the movie 21 Jump Street. When Channing Tatum went to high school the first time, he drove a muscle car that was cool. When he became a detective and went back to high school, the younger kids were more environmentally conscious and felt that the excess burning of fossil fuels contributed to depletion of the ozone layer. So it was now cool to drive a Prius. Channing Tatum couldn't conform until he learned all the new high school norms. While conformity is the norm, the minority is usually disliked. But history's leaders were originally dissenters, asserting their independence. According to Moscovici, nonconformists derive power from their style. They must be forceful and persistent, yet flexible and open-minded. Based upon this, the majority will listen to a minority influence if that minority influence repeats their position, if the dissenter is unlikely to yield, if the dissenter is self-confident and has dedication, but they also must have a point. And the majority will listen to the minority influence only if the speaker is an accepted member of the group. Next, we'll look at compliance. Words alone, if they sound good, are enough to elicit compliance. The norm of reciprocity is also the golden rule. Do unto others as they would do unto you. Or, when it turns negative, an eye for an eye. This is doing someone a favor. Dennis Reagan performed an experiment where he had a Confederate bring or not bring a participant a Coke, and then asked that participant to buy raffle tickets. On average, the participant bought more raffle tickets after the Confederate had bought them a Coke. There are also several sequential request strategies. This is when you make 2 or more related requests. The first request sets the trap, and the second request captures the prey. The first is foot in door. You start small and lead up to a bigger ask. In one experiment, experimenters called housewives and asked them to answer some questions. A few days later, they called back and asked if the housewives would allow a handful of men into their homes for 2 hours to rummage through their drawers and cupboards so they could inventory their household products. When they did not call ahead of time, only 22% agreed. When they did call ahead of time, 53% agreed. The next sequential request strategy is lowballing. This is where you start small, and then there's a bait and switch. This is used in car sales. The manager will come back and say, or the salesman will come back and say that the manager would not approve the sale. People go along with this because they feel they have made a commitment. There's also the door and face strategy, where you start big with your request. A Boy Scout will make a request for a person to buy 2 $5 tickets to the circus. When rejected, he'll ask if the person will buy $1 chocolate bars. This works specifically by guilt. Then there's the that's not all strategy. This looks like a better deal. We've all seen this on TV. They'll throw in something for free. More people complied when the customers were led to believe that the final price represents a reduction. Obedience. Milgram's destructive obedience theory has been brought into the 21st century by Mies and Rejmaker's study. They did a very similar test to Milgram. This Confederate was to take a test as part of a job interview. If he passed the test, he got the job. The participants were told to harass the test taker. As they did, he pleaded for them to stop, became angry, and ultimately failed. There were 15 stress remarks. In the control group, no one went to the max. But when the experimenter ordered them to go on, 92% exhibited complete obedience. Defiance is another prong of obedience. Obedience is an individual act, whereas disobedience is a collective act. It is much harder to control the acts of a group than it is to control the acts of an individual. Let's move on to group performance. Groups perform best when their members are assigned roles that best match their talents and personalities. Process loss or gain is when a group performs worse or better than its individuals. Process loss is the reduction in group performance due to obstacles created by group processes, such as problems of coordination and motivation. In an additive task, the product is the sum of the members' contributions. But in these tasks, people engage in social loafing and the group works to less than its potential. In a conjunctive task, the group is subject to the weakest link. For example, in a mountain climbing team, the group performance is usually worse than the performance of the individual members. In a disjunctive task, the group product is that of the best idea, no matter how many group members there are. In practice, however, groups often overlook the best answers. What happens when groups make decisions? One of the things that happens is groupthink. It happens when the need for agreement takes priority over seeking accurate information and making appropriate decisions. It's a bias where very smart people make very dumb decisions. It was seen in the Columbia Space Shuttle disaster when they saw that a piece of foam had broke off and hit the wing. The need for agreement took priority over the motivation to obtain accurate information and make a good decision. Groupthink is usually seen where there's a highly cohesive group, a homogeneous group with a strong leader. It's usually seen in a stressful situation. There are several ways where you can combat groupthink. Consult with outsiders. Have one member play devil's advocate. Have the individuals be held personally responsible for the group's decisions. And increase diversity within the group. Another thing that happens is bias sampling. When each person within the group has unique pieces of information, a group may fail to consider important information that is not common knowledge. Again, this was seen in both the Challenger and the Columbia disasters. The engineers had specialized information that did not go up the chain of command. Transactive memory is another thing that can happen in groups, where you divide a large body of information into smaller portions and delegate it among group members. Everyone must know who knows what. They must trust each other's specialized knowledge, and they must coordinate their efforts. We do this in my job with a conference call. All the lawyers for the different parties will get together and we will have a conference call and make sure that everybody is taking care of their different parts of a major transaction. To be effective, a group must make a plan. Let's move on to conflict. Cooperation and competition with and between groups is called conflict. Conflict within a group is called, there are social dilemmas within group. What is good for one is bad for all. A social dilemma is where the individual will gain by pursuing his own self-interest, but everyone in the group will suffer. The prisoner's dilemma is basically the reason you never talk to police without a lawyer. The prisoners have been picked up on charges, and the police do not have enough evidence to charge them both with a major crime. They only have enough evidence to charge them with a minor crime. So they are trying to turn one against the other. If both of the prisoners stay quiet, both will get a small amount of punishment. If one confesses, one prisoner gets no punishment and the other gets the maximum amount of punishment. If both prisoners confess to the more serious crime, both get somewhat longer sentences. There's also resource dilemmas, where large groups are more likely than small groups to exploit a scarce resource that the members collectively depend on. These are more likely environmental resources. There was also an experiment by psychologist Dylan Selterman, who gave his class a chance to earn extra credit points. Each student chose 2 or 6 extra credit points. If more than 10% of the class chose 6 points, no one got anything. And the result of his experiment is that no one earned anything. Negotiation. Groups can avoid conflict by negotiation. An integrative agreement is one that is better than a 50-50 split. You may have heard the story of the 2 sisters who were trying to split an orange. They ended up splitting it in half, 50-50. One sister peeled the orange and threw away the peel and used the middle for the juice. The other sister peeled the orange, threw out the middle, and used the peel to make a cake. So what should have happened is, had they disclosed their goals, they would have known that they needed to reach an integrative agreement, which is one that is better than a 50-50 split. The one sister could have had the entire peel for her cake, and the other sister could have had the entire middle for the orange juice. Collectivists see that the first part of negotiation is building trust between negotiators. They utilize indirect communication and avoid direct conflict. Some of the most important communication is nonverbal. This is in direct conflict with how an individualist would conduct a negotiation. This is very important for cross-cultural negotiators to know, because emotional responses may hurt negotiations if they are deemed inappropriate. For example, negotiators from Hong Kong were less likely to accept a proposal made by a manager with negative rather than positive emotions. And this is all very important for international negotiations. I'd like to present you with my questions. Due to the coronavirus, many people are working at home and meeting in virtual teams. Based on process loss, social loafing, and biased sampling, do you think these Zoom groups work equally well as in-person groups? And the second is, they say a horse by committee is a camel. Many churches are governed by committees. Is this group method of leadership of the local church biblically sound? Thank you so much.